Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel live stream. How you guys doing? I hope everybody's doing good. Small update before we get started, in case you guys didn't see this. My car is here. It's not here at home, but it's there. It's parked. I saw it already, and I'll slowly start building up the video. But what I wanted to share with you is uh, I I am gonna do like a small contest. Sorry, I'm moving the screen. I'm gonna do a small contest, and basically, I want you guys to guess. You've been watching my channel for over a year, just over a year now. I want you to guess what that car is, basically what model it is, and what trim it is, what are the options. And every week from now until the car reaches 1,000 miles and it has and then we'll do the reveal video with the brake and oil change. I want you guys to guess. Every week, less than a week sometimes at some point, I'll put a clue, and all the details are in the community tab of the channel. Later on, you can check it out. And once we get to the point where I reveal the video, I will pick one participant that guessed them right, and I will send you a gift. So it's here. I'm super excited and happy, but she's coming. You'll see her pretty soon. And the first clue is it's a Toyota. Oh, who would have guessed that? Anyways, let's get started with the live stream, guys. What do you say? You ready? Let's do this. All right, so XSEJ, my 2009 Venza V6 all-wheel drive, have some vibration from 20 to 40 kilometers per hour during acceleration. Check other outer CV boost, no leak. Is there possibilities inner CV joint going bad, or could it be a transmission? I doubt it's a transmission, but what I would look at is axles, the front axles, the drive shaft. You said this is a wheel drive. Check for loose U joints. This is gonna be better if you put it on a lift. I mean, that is how we diagnose it. This is some diagnosis you can't do DIY. Put it on a lift, put it in drive, accelerate, and then see what's causing the vibration. You'll usually be able to see it very clearly. That is one way we would diagnose a vibration. But look at the axles. Do you have an aftermarket axle? That's the problem with aftermarket axles. Sometimes they're not balanced. Definitely check the inner joints, see if there's any leaks. That's usually your telltale signs. What should you be chasing after? So Jim Tomlinson, why does my 2007 Lexus GX begin shuddering at about 60 miles an hour? I don't feel it in the steering wheel. Well, it could be a lot of things. The first thing is, does it change if you accelerate or if you like let go of the gas? That's the first thing I would look into. The other thing is tires and wheels. Again, that is something that is common with Toyota trucks. They're a little sensitive to tire wheel imbalance, so that's something I would definitely check and look into as well. So Brian Lassane, have a 2021 RAV4 hybrid. Mechanic said the best thing besides maintenance is to drive it as much as possible in order to get the most life out of the batteries. This is a good advice. So not drive it where you're excessively putting excessive miles on the car, but don't let it sit for long periods of time. And I've said this before, but let me specify what the long period of time is. Don't let it park a month, then drive it for a month, then leave it again parked for a month, especially in cold weather. That is really not healthy for the battery. But if you're driving this day, if you're driving this car, let's say every day you're commuting to work, your commute's 5 miles, that's good enough. You're moving this car, you're letting that battery go through its discharge cycles, and that is very good. Just don't let it sit for over a month at a time, because that's really not good for the battery. But also don't go intentionally out just to put miles on the car, because that also doesn't do much extra. Andrew Bibe, 2008 Lexus IS 250 makes a noise while braking, like a squeal and pop thing when stopping from slower speeds. Mechanic said it's bad sway bar links. Is the suspension work expensive? He says no, not so much. So this will need kind of in-person diagnosis, but if he's looking at sway bar links, they're not really expensive. That's not, well, that can get expensive in the suspension. It's like control arms and other stuff. But the squeal and the pop, the squeal kind of could point me toward brakes more than suspension stuff, but the pop could be. One thing with sway bar links, like if you're going really slow, if you shake the steering wheel kind of fast side to side, that'll actually make them make noise. Typically, that's an easy way to check them. That's one thing I would check. But as far as cost, if it is sway bar links, they're not extremely expensive. So, Jillian Morihata, I will be away from home for the next 6 weeks. Is that too much to leave the car alone? I want to ask a friend to drive it, turn it on sometimes 6 weeks of the car, never moving. Will it ruin it? Well, it's not going to ruin it, but it's it's better to have someone drive it every 2 weeks. Just start it up, drive it around the block. That way, your battery doesn't die, your brakes doesn't rust if it's parked outside, and especially if it's parked outside, I would definitely have your friend drive it if it's possible. If it's not possible, what are you going to do? But at least disconnect the battery if it's not possible. But if you have a friend, I would let him drive it. Take it for a spin around the block every every 2 weeks or so, and that should be good. Anthony Elaine Forever, 2008 Orion, changed all motor mounts and still getting a clunk, or to be exact, a disengagement sound from the front right side of the car. Usually happens when car and park going from first to second. This is something that will potentially need in-person diagnosis, but I'm thinking an Orion is like a Camry. That is a model we don't have in the US, but it is similar to a Camry. I would need to know if it's V6, four-cylinder, because that really helps me if I know what engine it is. But other stuff is if you've checked all your motor mounts, all this stuff, I would look into the subframe. Is there a bolt broken? If there's something loose, that's usually the next thing after you've checked all your motor mounts and made sure none of them have excessive play. Then look into the subframe, because the subframe could also move if there's something loose and would make that disengagement sound. Sprite, my brakes for my vehicle sometimes makes a noise while braking. It is like a whistle. I have new brakes and they were installed recently. Can it just be dirty brakes? Can that just cause the sound? So it could be, you said a whistle. Usually brakes will make a squealing noise. I wonder if that's the noise you're having. Who installed the brakes? That's the first question you want to ask. And were they greased properly? That is an important thing, because if they're not greased properly, they're going to make that squealing noise. And following it up with good greasing, make sure there's grease between the shims, because if you don't, or if the shims are missing completely, they're going to sing every time you brake. So that's the first thing I would look at. So let's see here. Tom Davis, I have a 2014 Prius and a 2015 Lexus ES300H. Will these hybrids benefit from non-ethanol pure gasoline? Is it worth the additional cost? So any car, not just hybrids, but especially your two cars, will especially benefit from the non-ethanol or pure gasoline. Folks, gas with ethanol is corrosive. It's not really very, gas mileage wise, it is not the greatest. Any chance you get at getting non-ethanol gasoline, like 100% pure gasoline, get it. It's good for your car, it's good for your gas mileage, and life is great. Ryan Z, have some electrical problems. Where should I check for rodent damage in a 4Runner? Once my brakes turned, my gauges and power off, but not again. So if the common spot in the 4Runners is open the hood right there by the brake actuator, that's one spot that we always see it. And the exact same spot in that corner, like right where the fender is and the firewall, on the other side. These are two spots that seem rodent always go in them. Random spots, and this is less 4Runner, more other models, you'll find them like right underneath the headlight. These are super common spots for rodents. Another place is if you pop the engine cover, you sometimes will nest. Not as common there, but that's one area I would look if you suspect you have rodent damage. And the main thing is you want to look at like droplings or signs. All of a sudden there's leaves in a strange place, or there's a foul smell when you open the hood, or you'll see like the insulation on the hood, they'll start eating at it. When you see that, you really got to dig in and find out where they are and what they're doing. These are the telltale signs that there could be something going on. Um, but yeah, these are the spots that are very common. I've seen so many forerunners get chewed up on that corner by the ABS actuator. So AB does short in town 10-mile trips, non highway break in driving still need 1,000 miles. I would still go the 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles, anywhere between 500 and 1,000 miles is a good range. It doesn't matter how long it takes, but if you get to the 500 miles in, let's say you're all doing city driving, and 1,000 miles it might take a long time. If you get to 500, you can call it a day, because most of the manuals, some of them will say 500, some of them will say 1,000. We say 1,000 if it's possible, if you're driving a lot, but you can cut it short at 500 and call it a day. It should be good, because some people take them a really long time to get to 1,000 miles. Not me. Don't worry. My car will come very soon, because I drive like almost 400 miles a week. So it'll be very soon. Very soon. Coding with Dave. I have a Lexus IS250 and I'm getting an error P2238 and P2237. I replaced all 402 sensors. It kept from jumping from bank one to bank two and back to bank one. Can you tell me what's up with my car? Yeah. So, do you have exhaust leaks, even the smallest ones? And don't quote me on this. I got to look this up. But some models had a TSB where there was like a software update to resolve these two codes. I got to look them up for your specific model and year. But if you keep getting these codes, and these codes are kind of cut and dry, um, if you have exhaust leaks, that could be an issue. The second thing is, are you getting original sensors? Some of these models, and you didn't list what year is your IS250, some of them were very sensitive to which sensor you are using. So make sure you're using original sensors on these. Joe D, 2020 Lexus ES300H, remote start not functioning. The DCM module and tech stream indicates selected system is not responding or not available. Please check repair manual full application. So a simple check, does the light turn on green on the, like on the overhead console, the SOS button that has a red and a green light? Is the light green? If it is, it's communicating, but we have a problem in communication between the DCM in the car to the network of the car locally. But if the light is red, then you have a problem communicating between the DCM itself and the cellular network. But that shouldn't give you an issue communicating with the DCM locally. If no lights are on, and that's what I'm interested in, the first thing you want to do is unplug the battery overnight, plug it back in, and see if it comes to life. You want ideally to either have a green light lit or a red light lit all the time. That's fine. Red light is okay too. But if you have no lights, and you could have just a dead DCM, and all the remote start operations go through the DCM. Even when you don't have a subscription, they still go. You still need an operational DCM to get that running. So disconnect the battery. If not, you might have a dead DCM. We do need to do on the dealership side some diagnostic to see if it's responding, if it's what's going on. You do have a text stream, but you might have to call in to have them try to communicate with the DCM, see if they locate it. Funny story here. Recently, we had a DCM car that was not communicating. When we called the center and they were trying to ping the DCM to see if it's responding, it picked up its location somewhere in Africa. That was pretty random and weird, but yeah, I don't think it's in Africa. I'm sitting in the car when I'm calling you. So it does do some strange things. DCMs are, this is why I told you guys, they're not the greatest thing. They haven't really gotten taken care of yet. Ian Smith bought a 2013 Prius, 130,000 kilometers, seems to be running well. Maintenance is good. Had it 3 months, very careful driving and only getting 39 miles per gallon. Well, the first thing I want you to check is the rear brakes. They're notorious to seize up on these. So check the brakes, make sure they're not seized up. Look at your tire brands, check your tire pressure, do the initial testing, because I've seen so many Priuses of these with the rear brakes locked up. And recently I had a viewer that the brakes locked up completely. They were making noise. But it's usually when it starts and you don't notice it is when the mileage goes down. That's the first sign. But this viewer that we did the brakes, after we did it, his gas mileage immediately jumped back up. And he immediately texted me a few days later. He's like, "Oh wow, the gas mileage went back up," because we were concerned because this car burns oil, and we were concerned that this is why his gas mileage is dropping. But it was not. It was just the brakes. So check the brakes, check the tire pressure as a initial stages. Dave Pokima, I'm considering importing a Japanese make right-hand drive 2006 IS350. Should I be concerned about anything? So I'm guessing you're not in the US because 2006 you can't really import them here. Usually these Japanese gray imports, you're going to have some hard time getting specific parts, and some things will not work ever, like navigation will be locked in Japanese and you can't use it. But otherwise, a model like an IS350, you're going to find parts for it everywhere. Not some specific stuff, because it's right-hand drive, you might not easily, but other stuff, they're very available. But when you get a model that's only made in Japan, you go buy a Toyota Century, for example, they're really hard to get parts for because this car was never sold anywhere. You're going to have to cross-reference parts, and it gets difficult. But something like an IS350, check it, of course, simple inspection. Some of these cars, older cars in Japan, when they're sold for export, they sit for a long time. So immediately, brakes might need work, tires might need replacement, fluids might need refreshing. But otherwise, I mean, it's an IS350. You can't go wrong with one. 99 Cooking, 2002 Tacoma pre-runner with 275,000 miles. Transmission fluid is burgundy chocolate. Should I change it? I inherited a truck June 2020 with had new fluid. Other than that, I don't know the service history. So this one is interesting because burgundy chocolate is not a good color for transmission, especially in a 2002 Tacoma. In this case, I would honestly just leave it alone. If you don't have a solid history where you are sure this has been replaced, I would leave it alone because this is way too much miles to be really moving anything uncomfortably for the transmission and the clutches. So Phoenix Pie, would you recommend the two-wheel drive 2022 Tundra? Maybe because more people buy four-wheel drive and Toyota spend more resources on them. Thus, four-wheel drive is more reliable than two-wheel drive. Well, that's not the case because actually two-wheel drive models are simpler. When they design these things, they're going to design each component separately and they're just going to put them together. So they're all, so your engine will, for example, two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, the engine will be the same. The transmission, for the most part, is the same internally. It's just the mounting the body outside of the transmission is different. So I wouldn't say that the four-wheel drive would be more reliable. Actually, I mean, technically, the two-wheel drive have less components, less maintenance, but typically, I encourage people, even if you don't use four-wheel drive, the difference in price typically is not massive, where you're better off for a resale perspective. Kind of look at right now, if you want to do like a little bit of research, look at how much going for a four-wheel drive model is going to cost you today and difference between them, and then go look at 5-year-old trucks. What's the price difference in the market for similar miles, similar options between two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive? You're going to notice that the difference is big because you might not need four-wheel drive, but the following owner might. And this is where you want to make a good financial decision for the future, not necessarily now, but do that research. That's what I would recommend you look into. Not just I don't need two-wheel drive. You might actually make up at the end when you go trade in this car by just spending a little bit extra for that four-wheel drive, because it's highly desirable, of course, any model with four-wheel drive. Pizza Pie, cold weather question for 2004 LS430. That's the best car ever made. Is it important to warm up the engine before driving off each morning? So most people, and this is coming up, folks, in a video about things you should never do in your automatic transmission. That's coming up very soon. Most people are so concerned about warming up your engine, but the reality is, in most cases, you're trying to warm up your transmission. People never think of it this way. Transmissions need to warm up. Engines, they have combustion, they will warm up. As soon as you have oil pressure, and it starts warming up pretty fast. But the transmission doesn't really have combustion. It has friction, it has all that, but that doesn't warm things up like, you know, the combustion from the engine. So I would, in really cold weather here, I would give it 2-3 minutes. We're not talking 15-20 minutes of warming up, but at least give it 2-3 minutes. And you're going to notice in a car, an older car like that, you won't go past third gear until it's warmed up and the computer is happy. That's intentional to warm things up. So my advice to you in cold weather is start the car, let it sit down, let it just idle. Usually Toyota and Lexus models, they'll idle up, and then after 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes, they'll start idling down. That's your cue that things are warmed up, you are in closed loop. Let's get going. So I just want you to shift that mentality. There are certain things about cars is that we're locked onto, oh, you gotta warm up the engine. But actually, you gotta warm up the transmission more than the engine. Engines have come a long way, and they no longer, you know, need really that long time to warm up, but transmissions still do. To a point where manufacturers, Toyota, are putting, now they're calling it not a transmission cooler, transmission warmer, because they want to warm that transmission. So more on that in the video, a little bit more details of what happens, but give it a few minutes until your idle down finishes and go. You should be good. So let's see here. So here's another question. The head gasket of my 2003 Corolla blew, white smoke coming out of the exhaust, and the engine overheated. I have the money to fix it, but now I just want to get a used car with lower miles. Is it a wise choice? So honestly, that's going to depend on the condition of the car. How is the rest of the car look like? Is it super rusty and falling apart? Is the transmission shifting bad? It's been in an accident and the body is beat up. Is the interior beat up? You gotta look at the whole picture. In the current times, and this advice, I don't know, in case you're watching this video later, this advice only applies to now, where the market's really difficult to find used cars, and cars have really crazy values. It might make sense to fix this car, but don't fix it with the mentality of I'm going to sell it. Don't cut corners, fix it right, but fix it with the mentality you're going to sell it. What is this car worth? You do not want to total the car unless you already have something else that you can buy at a reasonable price, then it's not worth it. But that's very difficult in these days. So I would shop around. Look, how much is the engine? How much is this car worth in good working condition? And if I decide not to do that, how much can you find a car for a reasonable price that is better? Because if it's not, then this is your car. You know it, you know what it needs, you know what I've done to it. You put an engine that has some kind of warranty. You're guaranteed that this engine is good, and you know the rest of the car. But then you dump this car, you go buy get something else. It might also have issues. Unless, I don't know if you're thinking of buying new, that would be a different story. But these are the options. These are the things that I advise you to think about. But investing money in an old car, if it's in good shape, it might be worth it. But if it's not in good shape and it has extreme high miles, it absolutely makes no sense to invest a lot of money in it. Joey the Dime, thank you for all the great content. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching. 2019 4Runner Limited, I have to put it in storage for a year. Any tips? Is it okay to store the battery out of the truck? Should I put the truck up on jack stands? So if it's possible to put it on jack stands, that will be ideal. Make sure you lift it from the frame, of course, not from the body, but make sure it's safe, that nobody's going to be walking around it in case. And the other thing is take the battery out of the truck. Actually, that's a good idea. And where you are storing it, try to cover it up. Dust is not great for paint. Cover it up, get the battery out of it, leave it with, and this is the choice you're going to have to make. You either leave it with a full tank of gas and then to avoid moisture in the tank, or you leave it with very little gas. So when you come back, you can immediately put fresh gas in it, and life is good. But then you could have moisture in the tank from all this time sitting. You're gonna have to pick which one is less worrisome for you: driving an old 1-year-old gas or having potentially moisture in the tank. But ideally, replace the gas, or at least when you come back, go through that tank of gas quickly, intentionally, just to get rid of it, and then put fresh gas. Of course, if you want to put stable, that is a good idea in this case. But otherwise, get the tires off the floor. That would be a good idea, and then get the battery off. The Honest Realtor, would you recommend a catch can or a new Forerunner? Also, are there some different brake-in instructions for four-wheel drive? So the catch can absolutely does nothing for Forerunner. Honestly, they're not known for um, issues with their PCB system. So I wouldn't. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything if you want, but I wouldn't. Um, as far as four-wheel drive braking, you'd want to avoid heavy off-roading, of course. You still want to cycle the four-wheel drive during the braking period, but avoid heavy off-roading in the braking period. Not really for four-wheel drive. There's no braking for four-wheel drive, but avoid heavy because you buy a Forerunner, the temptation to go off-roading is very high. But try to avoid it the first 500 to 1,000 miles. So Moon River ordered a new Venza. Is it really a transmission? And should the lithium ion battery be better than my old nickel metal hydride? So the transmission, I'm trying to read your comment here. Is it really a transmission? It's not really, it's a CVT, eCVT transmission. It's not really a CVT per se. It operates in the theory of a CVT. But look, folks, as far as hybrid transmissions lately, they have been extremely reliable. I mean, I haven't been doing much with hybrids other than maintenance lately. Every once in a while, we get a second, third generation Prius with some battery or some hybrid work, but the current generation hybrid system is phenomenal. We're going to talk about that in a recent videos coming up here. But the lithium ion battery, honestly, this is the God honest truth. It's too early to tell. The nickel metal hydride is great. We've had it for years. The lithium ion is too new so far. No zero issues, of course, but time will tell, and I think they'll be good. Jacob S. First generation Tacoma needs new A340e trans. What is your opinion on Asen Warner factory rebuilt units from Ohio? What is the dealership process for obtaining them? Should I buy a factory rebuilt kit? So, one thing about transmissions at the dealership, we do not really rebuild transmissions anymore. Um, I'm not really Asen Warner. I think that is the company that Toyota uses. They're good. I really haven't seen issues with the Toyota rebuilt ones. Now, I don't know if you can just go to that company direct and buy it, but the factory rebuilt ones, they're worth it because they basically only reuse the case, dump everything inside the case, and put everything new. We really haven't seen much issues. Maybe one out of, I don't know, 2,000 transmissions, maybe you'll have a tiny issue, but it does have a warranty and a good one for labor and parts through the dealership. So if you're going to go rebuild, I would definitely go with the dealership rebuild because it's worth it. It's expensive, but it's worth it. Vital Nomads. Do serpentine belts loosen up over time, and can that make the tensioner pulley bounce on a 2016 Camry 110,000 miles? Belts do stretch over time, and that's normal, but that's why you have a tensioner. And the tensioner is designed to kind of pull the belt, keep tension on the belt, especially in your car. It has a spring-loaded tensioner. It will keep tension on the belt, but the tensioner pulley will always bounce a little bit. That is normal. It's just trying to keep the pressure on it, especially on your Camry. It's not a hydraulic tensioner where it's very strong. It's just a spring-loaded one. You'll see a little bit of movement to it, but as long as it's not making noise or some excessive movement where it's all over the place, I wouldn't worry about it. So Jeffrey Kelly, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. The comment was, "You've made me buy no other vehicle but a Toyota." Well, I'm glad. I own another car that is not a Toyota, and I can see how this could be a bank breaker if you're not doing the work yourself, and know how to get parts through. You're connected in the industry, that's as you would some other cars. Look, I own a Mercedes Benz, and I'll tell you, this is my dream car since I was a little kid, before I even know what Toyota is. um, they're not It's a beautiful car, but it will bankrupt you if you're not careful. And that's why people ask me, like, but you own this car and you're telling me not to buy one. I'm like, you got to realize one thing: BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Jaguar, all these companies, they're still open for business, but people that buy them, sometimes they don't think, they just look at the outside picture and they're in love. And that's great, but you really got to know what you're getting yourself into with some of these cars. With Toyotas, they are safe. They're perhaps not the most exciting cars in the world, but you know what? They do one thing and they do it very well. They are very reliable, they are simple, and they last, and they don't break your bank. That's you know th- Even for the most car enthusiast, myself, I am tired of putting miles on this thing, and every mile costs 10 times more than a mile in a Toyota. And it's just, at some point, you have to make the wise decision. We all have a very expensive hobby. My very expensive hobby is that pile of metal. I'll admit it. It absolutely makes no financial sense at all, but it's a hobby. But I need to not use my hobby as a transportation, because it's absolutely not a good idea. So, Nerdalot, is Walmart SuperTech oil as good as Mobile One? Am I safe using SuperTech oil? Honestly, I typically discourage you from buying big box store oil brands, because in some cases it is a rebranded somebody else's, but it just I don't feel comfortable with it. I would go Mobile One. I would go some dedicated oil company, but um, not super tech. I don't know. I just, maybe it's good. I haven't really had experience with it, but I generally don't feel comfortable with um, big box store brand oil, if you would. So, Arc Miro, I'm going to leave my 2021 Corolla Cross Hybrid for 1 year. Is it okay to fill my gas tank full, or can I use fuel stabilizer? I would fill it up, but use fuel stabilizer as well. That's what I would do personally, because the other option, I told the previous viewer, you have the two options, and you depends where you live. Is it a humid place? If it's dry, these are the decisions you need to make. But fuel stabilizer is better with a full tank. Overall, that could be the lesser of the two evils, if you would, but you should be good with fuel stabilizer. So, George, I'm looking to buy a used Matrix 2010, 2013. Any year I should avoid, and are they better than the Corolla from the same year? I know you said the Corolla was on the cheap side. The Matrix is also, unfortunately, on the cheap side. Stick with the 12, like 11 to 13. The 10, some of the early 10s did have some issues, especially with water pumps, leaks, and whatnot, VVTi rattle. That is, absolutely avoid the 2.4 liter on that year. These burn oil and they're out of the campaign. But stick with the 1.8. These are good cars. Avoid all-wheel drive model. This is going to surprise you. There are some issues with the all-wheel drive model that I hope nobody has to find out. Stuff like the transfer case braking. I've seen that actually a lot on these. But if you absolutely need the all-wheel drive, just make sure the front transfer case is good. We've seen so many of these just crack. And it's like, okay, well, now you need to pull the replace the transfer case. It seems like a rushed all-wheel drive system toward the end. It just didn't make sense. So I would stick with two-wheel drive 1.8, and you should be good 2011 to 2013. So, Lion Runner, can you please educate us on how a lift can affect Forerunner reliability, driveline issues, KDSS, Toyota safety sense, any solutions we can do, diff drop, adjustable UCA, adjustable track bar. So the main thing with lifting a Forerunner is the angles of your drive shaft, not really the rear. Unless you're going extreme lift, it could be an issue, but The front is the problem because you don't have a solid axle. You have a differential and two axles. General rule of thumb is when you lift the Forerunner, after you're done lifting it and you lower it on the ground, stabilize suspension, look at the angles of your axles. Ideally, before you lift the Forerunner, look at the axles. You eventually want to get very close to that angle. If you're not, you need to drop the front diff. But even that has a specific limit. You know, we have a customer at the dealership that lifted his Tacoma, and it's an extreme lift. We're talking monster truck lift. Okay, you basically need a stair to get into this thing. It barely fits through our service drive entrance. But this guy, they cut the frame and dropped the diff all the way down. This is heavy modification. But for normal people, you're not spending $50,000 to modify a truck. You just want a little lift, 2-3 inches, just to make it stand out, give it a little bit better off-road clearance. Just make sure your angles in the front, you don't have this is where your axle goes in your differential. You don't want it hanging down like this because that's going to wear your needle bearings on the front differential. You're going to start tearing into these axles, and it's not going to ride the same. This is too high of a lift. And then the other thing is Toyota Safety Sense. I will tell you the dealership version of this story. Others might want to modify it, but that's a giant liability, so you need to be aware of this. Toyota Safety Sense in these trucks, once you lift them, they're off the factory spec. You need to custom modify these factory specs for the calibrations for them to work. Is it possible? Is it doable? Yes. Do I want that liability? I don't, and neither should you, because these systems, they're driving the car for you. You need them to work 100% or not work at all. That's just my opinion. It's up to you on the rest. But the main thing is a front differential when you're lifting a Forerunner. I've seen so many Forerunners drive horrible because the lift was not done right. Nobody looked at the angles of the axles, and they just called it a day like that. So, CoQ on PR, can you repair an IAC valve in a 1990 Corolla 4AFE engine? I had traced the problem to the IAC, but can I find any info on it? So, the IAC really doesn't have much to it. There's a little motor that opens and closes and lets air in or not, and then there is the passages. If you got to distinguish where your problem is it the motor, that it's not the stepper motor not moving, or your passage is clogged? If your passage is clogged, you can clean it. The motor, unless you can find a rebuild kit, you're better off just getting a new one or getting a whole IAC valve. I don't know how available for a 1990 Corolla, but that's really, you're not going to find a lot of info on these because this is just trial and error, because Toyota sells it as a part. There's no service kit for it. So these are the two things you want to check in it. So Alfredo Cuervo, I have a 2014 Tacoma that has a ticking sound in the engine, but I noticed that when I put it in drive, the ticking noise goes away. What could be the cause? So you might have something with the exhaust, a small exhaust leak, especially closer to the uh, exhaust manifold. When you put the engine in drive, this exhaust moves and it could be closing that leak. That's one scenario. The other thing is, do you have something loose in the heat shields around the exhaust? That could be another thing. When you change the pitch, you change the speed of the engine. When you put it in drive, the idle drops down a little bit because of the load. It could be that. I would kind of look at the exhaust, look for exhaust leaks. The best way to check for exhaust leaks, for pinhole exhaust leaks, something small, is to block the exhaust. Use a towel. Be careful because it's going to be hot. Block the exhaust, and then have a second person block the exhaust, and then you go underneath it and listen. You're going to immediately hear it hissing because that air has nowhere else to go. It's going to go through the leaks, and you'll find them that way. Kalu Nat, how you doing, man? Is liquid moly engine flush a good product, or which engine flux do you recommend? So liquid moly is really good, but I'll just say this in keeping things honest, in all honesty, because this question has been asked a lot. So the engine flush products, the stuff that you're going to find from all these companies, different companies, nobody's trying to sell you snake oil, but these are watered down versions of the professional, like only professional chemicals, because the stuff we use at the dealership, for example, they're not sold to the public. They're for professional use only. These companies, they don't want that liability because this stuff is pretty harsh chemicals. You don't handle this well, or you don't follow the instructions word by word, you could cause serious damage to these engines. So the versions you find for retail, they don't want a lawsuit every 2 days. So they're kind of watered down versions of the strong chemicals that professionals use to kind of give you the same effect. But at the same time, if you don't follow instructions and do it all wrong, it's not going to cause damage. So liquid moly works really good. They seem to be one of the better ones, but I cannot really recommend a product because the stuff we use at work, it's not sold for the public. And I really, this stuff that we use, it's really good company that makes really good products. I pushed on this company and I told them, look, people are asking me about this. Is there any way I can, even through the channel, people that ask, I will tell, because stuff is not expensive. That's the best part too. The other retail products it's like $10 a bottle. But I told them, is there any way you would sell them to me and then I will be your distributor to sell it because people want this. It works. I know it works and I can recommend it. They said no. They just don't want to. So, okay, well, we can't do that then. So Conquer PR doesn't have a motor as it is integrated in the throttle body. Okay, that's an old style. I don't have a lot of experience with a 1990 Corolla right off the bat. Maybe we've seen one 5 years ago or something like that. But you're talking about the throttle body itself. That would be an air control valve. I would really have to look into this. If you don't mind, leave me a comment after this and I'll look into it for you. I don't have, this is a little too old to really have it. I haven't been working on this car too long. But do me a favor, leave a comment after this live stream is over and I'll look into it for you. Let's see. Gianni Capusiti, do you recommend buying the RAV4 Prime? Is there any reliability issues? Honestly, the RAV4 Prime, other than a couple things, very minor things, there's a ground for bolt, just silly things. There really hasn't, for as complicated and as over complicated that car is, just like the hybrids, there are no issues. But, and I'm reading the second comment, and uh, this is very important because I want to say it so everybody would hear it. If you're buying, actually, I've had this question way too much. If you're buying a RAV4 Prime, but you don't plan to plug it in, let's say you live in an apartment, you don't have access to an outlet, whatever the case, don't. Because other than the plug-in part of the RAV4 Prime, there is absolutely nothing different between a RAV4 Prime and a RAV4 Hybrid, except the giant price difference. If you're not going to utilize that plug-in hybrid part, do not buy a RAV4 Prime, buy a RAV4 Hybrid. It absolutely makes no sense. But you buying a RAV4 Prime, you're plugging it in, which needs to be your top priority and utilizing that EV range. Otherwise, it makes no sense. But they are fabulous cars. So far, we haven't really seen any issues with them. Usually, they've been out now almost a year. Usually, the first year, you're going to see the disasters. And it's been a very successful launch. Actually, we haven't seen any issues, if anything. So Nas Goth just installed new rotors and brake pads. What's the braking procedure to set them right? Because I have horrible MPG after install. Is something that could have gone wrong? Well, you want to make sure that nothing is seized. You know, when you spin the wheels, nothing is seized. You don't have a sticky pin. Basically, the pads are not dragging. Otherwise, I don't see why you would get horrible gas mileage. The braking procedure is just avoid hard braking, really hard braking, just the first 100, 200 miles, and it should be good. But as far as gas mileage, unless I would check, make sure there's nothing stuck, no pin is stuck, no pad is stuck, just the standard checks, but that would be something that would affect the gas mileage. So DDK 80, for those of us that live in Chicagoland area, how do we find you for Toyota service? Yes, so send me an email, thecarcarenut@gmail.com. Let me clarify this. The email situation has really gotten out of hand and out of control. So I am trying to prioritize your comments on the channel more than the emails. The emails are really difficult to catch up with. Some of them require a lot of time to write. They're not just like a comment where we're getting straight to the point. Sometimes people need more information. I try to help as much as possible, but it's really difficult. I'm a very busy person between the channel, my family, and work. I basically have two full-time jobs at this point. Um, the emails, if you need to bring me your car for service, send me an email, thecarcarenut@gmail.com, with the subject. This is very important that you do this. Otherwise, it could be months before I get back to you, unfortunately. But write Chicago service request. When you do that, that email gets pulled to the side, and Mrs. Carcarenut actually looks at it first, make sure that this is something that needs service. Then I see it, and then we schedule you in. But scheduling you in, it could be a month or two ahead because I'm really booked up ahead of time. So this could be stuff for repair. You want to have big stuff, small stuff, or sometimes if you're in the Chicago service, if you're in the Chicago area and you want your car featured on the channel, you request a specific video and you have that specific car, specific job that you want to see done. You're welcome to bring your car. We'll do the job for you, and then I'll film it so then everybody else in the community would benefit as well. Okay, let's see here. Sorry, guys. The chat's doing the same thing it did the last time. So there's a whole slew of questions, unfortunately, that just got wiped out. Let me try this again. This is the second time that it does this. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, guys. I've let YouTube know about this, but this is the second time that it does this to me, where it jumps the chat. Now I can't see your questions. I gotta get back to them. So let's start over. I apologize if I skipped over your question. That was not intentional. Mashur, I have a 2016 ES350 I bought 2 months ago. MPG is like 9 or 10 miles per gallon. Car has 65 mile. I checked everything: tires, brakes, lifter. Could it be plugs or mass airflow? Also, leak in the trunk from panoramic roof. Honestly, 9 to 10 miles per gallon, that is extreme. I would check. Yeah, I would definitely check the spark plugs. Although at this mileage shouldn't be the case, but make sure the brakes, you have nothing seized. Make sure your tires are inflated. I know you've checked them, but you want to check them for specific things. Clean your mass airflow. Make sure nothing is stuck on the brakes, because I'm going to repeat this because I've seen this so much. And then you said leak in the trunk from a panoramic sunroof. I wonder how that is. Is that what you mean? If you could clarify on that, that would be great. So, Luis, sorry guys, the live stream jumped the chat line again. I don't know why it does this every once in a while, but let's start with where I could see the comments. Luis, Prius L Eco versus Toyota Corolla, best choice, average 20,000 miles a year. Honestly, they are both exactly the same. If you're talking about the Prius versus Corolla hybrid, they're exactly the same mechanical wise, but as far as driving wise, look, the Prius is more of a specialty car. It gets slightly better gas mileage than the Corolla hybrid, but not that much. The Corolla is basically just a normal sedan that happens to be a hybrid and gets great gas mileage. I personally like the Corolla more. The Prius, looks wise, is my problem with it, but otherwise they're both really the same. So, just Robert, I decided to get a GR Corolla hatchback 1.8 liter, but I don't know about the color. I like the white one. The red one looks awesome with the black roof, but the silver is also a good look. Interesting. GR Corolla. We don't have those yet. I hope we get them. That's an interesting color choice. So, JA, how much would it cost to rebuild a 2012 Camry SE 4-cylinder engine? I'm assuming you're asking about the engine. So, The first thing is, do you need a short block or not? Typically with these engines, with the 2A RFE 2.5, you're gonna need a short block. Most of the time you do, because the cylinder walls are so easily scratched. I mean, guesstimate here, between 6,000 to 7,000 at a dealership, including a short block. Now, this will vary greatly. I'm just going off the memory of the last one we did, which I think I did a video on actually. Um, yeah, somewhere between 6 and 7,000, including parts, labor, and everything. Okay. So Omar Alvarado, on my 2008 Lexus RX 350, the tire light is on. Tires are new, properly inflated. Seems like I can't reset it. Is there nothing I can do to turn that light off? You can't turn it off, but did you check the spare tire on that? If I remember correctly, on the 2008 Lexus RX 350, the spare tire has a sensor as well. And if you've checked everything and no, check for codes. We've been seeing some strange things lately with tire lights. You'll get a tire that's on, not flashing, and you actually have a code for a sensor that's not reading. Don't know what's going on, why they're doing that all of a sudden, but many models are doing that. So check your spare tire first. If that doesn't do the trick, check for codes in the TPMS. 2000. So Sal Cooley, 2008. Oh, let's see this. 2008 Camry XLE 2.4. Can I use Valvoline Max Life for the transmission or WS? Honestly, I would only use WS transmission fluid. I do not recommend you use any aftermarket. Yes, some people have tried it. It's great, but I would use WS. Use always original transmission fluid. This is not just Toyota, this is everybody. It's not worth the risk. So Smith 8833, I have a 2009 RAV4 V6. It has a small amount of coolant leak from the O-ring, likely dried out. I believe it's an O-ring going into the thermostat housing. Any advice on completing replacement of this? So there are a total of 2 O-rings that you got to worry about. One of them is, so the thermostat housing has a coolant hose that connects on one side, and then behind it on a big section, like O-ring probably this big, right on the water pump, and then in the back there's a bypass pipe that comes in that has an O-ring, and that thermostat housing kind of clips on it. In order to replace that, jack up the engine, get that side mount off. Probably has, I think, a 14 millimeter nut at the bottom, a few 17s and a few 17s in the body, but you got to support the engine because it won't drop to the ground, but it'll make it harder. If you support it up a little bit, you can remove it easier. Then you'll have a side bracket that has a bunch of 14 millimeter bolts. Remove it, raise the engine a little bit so you can sneak it out, and then the thermostat housing will be right there. Two 10 millimeter bolts, one 10 millimeter nut, another hose that hooks up to the top of it. Get that hose off, pull that housing, the radiator hose as well. I mean, it's not really difficult if you've done work on cars. Could be a little cramped, could be a little bit tight, but nothing too much. But if you went that far, I would check the water pump. You pull the belt out, check the water pump, make sure the pulley has absolutely no movement. If it does, while you're there, might as well just drain the coolant. You have to drain the coolant for this, by the way. Um, you might as well replace the water pump at that point. I mean, they're so common on these, unless you know it's been replaced recently. It's not a bad job. But make sure you get these O-rings from Toyota. Don't go aftermarket; it's not worth it. And put some lubricant on this O-ring, because when you go slide that housing back, if you don't use anything and don't clean the area, you could split that O-ring again, and now we're back to square one. So make sure you put, usually I put a dab of silicone on it or something, just not silicone grease, not silicone as in cedar, but make sure you take care of that O-ring before you put that housing so it wouldn't split again. Okay, let's see here. No name. Can I flash my 2014 with the new 2.5 flash for more power? No, that they're completely different engines. If you mean With the new 2.5 flash, that means 2018 and up, that's completely different engine. You can't use the same software. Raj, I purchased a Highlander limited V6, 15,000 miles. Engine lags in low speeds and switches gears too fast and lags. It's irritating. Is it just issue with the engine? No warning lights. This is actually a transmission. This is a, you didn't list the year, but I'm assuming this is 17 and up. Uh, this is the 8-speed transmission fiasco. This is just how it is with the 8-speed transmission. Have the dealership reset the transmission memory, see if that improves. And then if it doesn't, if you just bought it, give it some time to learn your driving habits. It'll actually improve. It'll get better, but it's going to take some time. But to help it, have the dealership reset the transmission memory. That should kind of quicken things for it to learn. So, Mark Vivas, I bought an Aussie 2004 2.4 VX30 Camry before watching your videos and saw how bad this engine is. Does the Aussie have the same issues as the US made? So, it does, but the 2004 did not have a oil consumption issue. They did have some head bolt pulling issues, but just make sure this doesn't overheat. If it's not burning oil at this point, you're good. They could also burn oil with really bad maintenance, but not like the 2007 and up where they had a production issue. Um, these engines, just take care of the maintenance. Keep an eye on the water pump. Keep an eye on the radiator. They're common. You know, this is an older car, folks. This is a 17-year-old car here. I wouldn't be upset if the radiator goes. I wouldn't be upset if the water pump goes. I mean, even Toyotas, at some point, some typical things will go out, and you got to take care of them. Nothing is going to break the bank, but keep an eye on the cooling system in this car, because one overheat, you could pull the threads off the block, and then that's a problem. But if you take care of it, take care of the maintenance, you're not going to have those issues. So, Quick Shot Gaming, do you know if Toyota will bring the Corolla hatchback hybrids to the US? Honestly, I have no clue, because Toyota is such a secretive company. They just absolutely do not tell anything to their insiders unless there is a hint of it going out to the public. As far as the Corolla hatchback hybrid, it absolutely makes sense that they do. But if anything, and if I would say which model is coming, I would say the Corolla Cross hybrid makes more sense. It's a hot segment. CHR hybrid, I don't know why we don't have the CHR hybrid, because I think it's a good car. A little odd, but it's a very good car. A CHR hybrid would make a lot more sense. 2000 Steve K, 2011 Tacoma 4x4, 2.7, 65,000 mile, failed smog, O2 not ready, California SSC, FOU, exhaust pipe replaced, battery replaced 3 months prior, drove 1,000 miles, multiple drive cycle patterns, still failed. This one is going to be difficult, because if you want to restart everything, restart your monitor. So basically just erase your codes again and start all over. You really got to follow that drive cycle. Another thing is, and it's saying O2 not ready. That's kind of interesting, because O2s usually, they ready up pretty easily. But restart the monitor, reset the codes, and go drive the drive cycle and see if you can get it to pass. Because honestly, if not, then you might have an issue with an O2 sensor at this point. It's just not reading, not letting the monitor run. Lazy O2 sensor, that's another term for them. So reset it, restart. If it doesn't, swap out an O2 sensor, see what happens. Especially if this has this is a 2.7, you only have one O2 sensor, swap it out, see what happens. Because if it ain't getting ready, you got a lazy O2 sensor, and that's what I would go after next. Michael Weber, 2007 4Runner, 185,000 miles, 6-cylinder rear-wheel drive. Recently had a valve cover replaced, plugs, boots, PCV valve replaced. Runs perfectly, except average mileage went from 17 to 15. So were the plugs the correct plugs for the car? That's the first thing. I don't see the other stuff causing issues, but the main thing is the plugs. Were they the correct plugs for this car? And The valve covers not really, but is there anything still leaking? Is there any vacuum leaks, even the tiniest ones? You're going to want to check all this stuff because some of this stuff will not trigger a check engine light per se, but you're going to have the drop in performance and drop in gas mileage. Another thing on these that is notorious is front pads. I mean, I know we've said this 3 times in the live stream, but brakes dragging really will hurt your gas mileage. So check them brakes as well. All right, folks, we're going to take a few more questions and we'll call it a day. Let's see here. So, mensaje cargo. I own a 2011 Lexus GX 460, and my questions are: can you make a detailed video, and what's your take on them? So, actually really like the GX 460s and the GX in general. They're awesome. They're really good trucks. I wish Toyota would actually sell them under the Prado name, a little bit more basic and cheaper, but they don't in the US. But so here's what I have planned for the GX. I have currently at work a really good friend has a possibly one of the cleanest GX 470s that ever existed. Fortunately, he got in a minor accident. We're replacing some stuff. We're taking care of it. But um, once it's done, he have agreed to bring this truck here, and we'll do a kind of a full tour review. And I'll tell you things about the GX 470. Quickly after that, I'm hoping I want to just make it kind of a series followed by the GX 460. We'll talk about the difference between the two. We'll talk about what I like about them, what I don't like. It's kind of a mechanical tour and a lot of stuff. And speaking of the mechanic, I'll leave this, what I wanted to say, toward the end of a live stream. Let's wrap it up, and then I'll tell you a few things about the Tundra updates. Big Hamza 22. Good evening. What's the best maintenance to do for a Corolla CVT? You want to replace the transmission fluid every 60,000 miles on these. They do use a different fluid. This is not, unless this is a Corolla hybrid. If it's just a regular Corolla with a K313 or the other CVT, I always draw a blank on the name for it. It does use CVT fluid. Replace it every 60,000 miles or um, 6 years, and life is great. Jose Racinos, any advice on storing a 2014 Camry hybrid outdoors for 1 month, temperature of -30? That is -30 centigrade. That is too much, honestly. If you can store it indoors, I would. Otherwise, this is too much for 1 month. If you can have somebody start it for you every 2 weeks, every 1 week even. Um, Otherwise, as I really hope this is not a repeated thing because this will really wreak havoc on the battery, 12-volt battery, and the hyper battery. Santi, I bought a Q2 2017 Tacoma TRD for work, 13.5K miles, too much money. Did get an extended warranty. Should I keep it or terminate it? I did a few checks and the truck seems solid. Located in California. Honestly, I would keep it because um, that year Tacoma did have a. I mean, there's one front time and cover leak will pay for that warranty, honestly, and I would keep it on that because there are a few annoyances with this truck that could fire up your extended warranty, and I would keep it just for that. But make the most out of it. Be picky with the truck. Anything you see, you have an extended warranty. Don't just say, it's not a big deal. No, be very picky. You have an extended warranty, use it. That's what I would say. Unless it was some ridiculous price for the extended warranty, I would keep it because on that truck you might end up using it once or twice, which might pay for itself. All right, folks. So before we take the last questions, I'll share with you something that you all have been asking a lot about. The 2022 Tundra. Everybody's been asking, when am I going to do videos on the 2022 Tundra? Well, I found a solution for you guys. We're going to do, hopefully, sometime beginning of December, maybe the first 2 weeks of December, I will do a full engine review. Basically, tell you all the technology of this new engine, which is not really new, but we'll talk about that more over the video. We're going to look at all its technical specifications, things that you will not go see right now on the internet. You will learn everything there is about this engine, inside and out, technical details, how it runs, where are the new stuff in it, how reliable it's going to be, some predictions as well, and everything about the 2022 Tundra engine. And as far as the hybrid, everybody is making all kinds of speculations. At this point, there is zero technical information, true technical information about the hybrid drivetrain of the new Tundra. So I will not be talking about the hybrid drivetrain yet because there's zero technical information. Nobody outside the engineers that designed it really know how everything works exactly. So we're waiting for that to come out, and until it does, I'm not going to talk about it because I don't like to speculate and just make a whole video, waste your time, and say I think this and I think that. Well, let's talk about facts, not um, fantasies, if that's the word I want to say. James Carroll, you know what, brother? I 100% agree with you. James Carroll is a brother and an awesome viewer. People do not keep reposting your questions, folks. I asked you not to do this, and I see a lot of questions that are repeated. This is what causes the chat to jam up, and I would appreciate it if you don't post your questions and multiple times. Post it once, I will get to it. If not, there's the chat, there's the comments on the channel, and then there's next week for the live stream. So folks, I will take one last question. And if you've been watching my channel long enough, the last is always first. So here it is. Pablo Rosado, for the Corolla CVT, I read on the new owner's manual, you can increase the transmission life greatly by changing its fluids more often. The manual says inspect at 30 or replace if needed. So I like this. I wonder, Pablo, which country you are from. And please post it because I'm very curious about this. Because in the US, it actually tells you lifetime fluid. You got to check it every 60,000 miles, and life is great. You don't really have to replace it. Do let me know which country you are from and which year. I read on the new owner's manual. I wonder if this is a 2021 model. Just let me know which country you're from because, folks, this is the reality. You go for the same model that we have in the US that says lifetime fluid, you go across the world, it is there is a maintenance term, like a term for it or a time. It's like, why can't we get that in the US? That absolutely makes no sense. So please post the country because that I'm answering your question with a question. Let's take one last one. Chori Rio, I have a 2010 4Runner that has vibrations and between 50 and 60 miles per hour. So let's talk about the 4Runner vibration. There are so many theories, and honestly, I can only tell you what I've seen from real world. It's usually wheels and tires. Some people have theories that it's something with the suspension design. Not really, because there are a lot of 4Runners out there that don't have the vibration. If there is a problem with the suspension by design, all of them will vibrate, not just certain ones. And yours probably didn't vibrate and then it started. The most important thing is this modified? If it is, it's out of the question. That could be the case. But if it's not modified, it's stock, and you have stock tires, not big mud tires, make sure you have a really good shop, dealership that has a calibrated machine, road force balance these tires. I've seen so many shops that, oh, we road force balance, but when was the last time you calibrated your machine that you're supposed to calibrate it daily? 6 years ago when you bought the machine? Yeah, this is the problem. Nobody calibrates their machines. Shops, you got to calibrate these machines daily. The balance, the road force, they need to be calibrated. They need to have service to them. Just like cars need maintenance, these equipment need maintenance. Nobody does it. And when you do it and you go balance the same tire before you did it and after, it's like it's completely different. So that's FYI, you are going to need a shop that really has a good machine that is calibrated. All right, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you contribute to the little contest we have about the car. Just go to the community tab, go to the channel, go community tab, and you'll see it as the first post. That's where I will be posting the clues for the upcoming channel car. And then when it reaches 1,000 miles, I will do a full video from beginning when it first came in all the way to kind of the journey to 1,000 miles and everything I do to new cars when I get them. It'll be a fun video for everybody. You'll see how I receive a new car care style, if you would. Guys, thank you so much for watching the live stream. Next live stream will be next Saturday at 7 p.m. Same time, same thing. And then we'll update you from there on out. Thank you so much for watching the live stream. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And we'll see you guys in the next live stream.